You know, every year when Christmas rolls around in Canada, the first thing on my mind is let's go surfing. My name's Stenberg, professional filmmaker and photographer, and this is Behind the Photo. In Canada in winter, we don't necessarily think about boating and getting in the lake to go wake surfing. So as the season was coming to a close, I thought to myself, for one of my clients, what could we do to sell some boating in the middle of December, maybe as a Christmas present? And as I thought about it, there was only one logical solution. We've got to get Santa surfing. So in September, you'd think the lake might still be pretty warm. It's actually not. And so to brave the conditions of a, tepid, cold bath at the end of September in a cold lake, yeah, it's a big ask. So the only person I could ask to do that was my friend Jordan McCallum, owner of Penticton Boat Club. And obviously he stands to benefit from this if anybody actually does buy a gift card or buy a boat club membership in the middle of winter for Christmas. But nonetheless, it's still super hard to get in a cold lake, especially wearing that getup. But I have to respect his full commitment, not only for surfing in the Santa suit, but for carrying the bag, wearing the tiny little prop glasses, the beard, everything. We did this ridiculous Santa surfing thing. What's it like to surf in a Santa suit?
It was different. It was different. It was a cold day, very cold day. I think the water was about 13 degrees. So, but you got to do it for the content. So really was hoping to keep it dry. And once that failed, it really just became even more difficult. I'd say the hardest part was not being able to see my feet because of the beard and, the glasses. I'm not used to wearing that kind of stuff. So. And luckily I didn't have the belly as well to make it even worse, but could have maybe used a set of nice Santa boots to a little bit of extra grip that day, keep my feet warm. That would have probably been nice.
I mean, it's not really obvious in the video, but it was super cold. I mean, not cold like it is at the moment out there, but it wasn't summer, and it kind of looks summery, but it was definitely chilly.
Yeah, September weather. I mean, maybe we got to put some snow into the hills or something to make it look like an actual winter surf. Or we could get out there right now. I mean, the lake's glass right now.
It's pretty nice. I think if we were totally insane, maybe we would do that, yeah.
Yeah, we'll need to get a thermal Santa suit when we get a deal with Arc'teryx or something next time, and we can just kind of put something together for me, yeah.
All right, so I think that this is the photo of the day. The hat flying off in midair, the waves are super choppy, you've got the spray coming up behind the surf, and Jordan's there looking super intense. He's got the Santa sack on. Yeah, conditions not super ideal, but pretty cool. I shot this at 40 millimeters. We were using the Sony 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8 G Master, the original one, not Dan Mark II. ISO 100, and this is at 1/8,000th of a second at f2.8 because I wanted to have a little bit of a shallow depth of field. Obviously 40 millimeters isn't going to give you, incredibly shallow depth, but from the back of the boat to him is actually not very far on these surf boats. The surf wake kind of just cuts in quite close behind the boat, so you don't have a lot of distance. You really do tend to shoot sort of between, 70 millimeters would be a pretty tight shot, but 40 mils gives you a nice perspective, nice framing, and we've got kind of all the elements here. We've got the hat. 1/8,000th of a second is enough to have all the spray as individual droplets and not some sort of motion blurred thing. We've captured the motion pretty clear. And then, I wanted to shoot at 2.8, so that's why we have such a high shutter speed. You have to respect your full commitment to the costume and to the character. You weren't willing to just go out there just in the suit. You had to have the glasses, and we had to pass you the bag with the toys. And I think at one point you were even checking what was in the bag.
Yeah, I
while
thought
you were
maybe I
surfing.
could pull some toys out. If we're gonna get out there, I got to get real with it, right? So, maybe we need the belly next time. That's a little extra. But I think athletic Santa, had to come out once in a while. So.
Also, just surfing in that getup. it's not really conducive to good surfing. So I don't think anybody else really could have pulled that off.
Well, I'm sure there's somebody out there good enough, but once it got wet, it kind of just felt like it was a real nice, heavy wet blanket, really pulling you around. But once you kind of got comfortable, maybe it grounded me, kept me on the board so I didn't fly away.
this sometimes happens in an action shoot. You've got your camera settings all dialed, and then, you change orientation and you go from your video camera to your still camera, and all of a sudden, your shot's totally underexposed. So I did have to play with this on a little bit. So I could have shot this at maybe 1/4000th of a second or 1/2000th of a second and got the result that I wanted. But, the nice thing about shooting in RAW is it gives you a lot of latitude. So the Sony RAW files are quite robust. So I've had to boost the exposure by, 2 1/3 stops there. I like having a little more contrast there. I really, in this particular instance, wasn't looking for that muted effect. I really wanted a vibrant, colorful photo because we had these beautiful blues and we've got the red suit and it's Christmas. So shadows, I've boosted that because obviously, if I change this, it just gets a little muddy. And I think, we're having some strong sunlight. We want to make sure that we can see all the detail in the suit. So it was okay to boost the shadows a bit, but because of that, we're going to get a little bit of noise in here. A little bit of white, +7, and then crush the blacks just a tiny bit for detail. And I'm looking mostly in here for that. Curves, I've kept the mid-tone curve like fairly sort of middle of the road, but maybe just a little boost there. And I've dropped the highlights a touch. White balance, we're shooting around 6000 Kelvin or 5990. I kind of like shooting in the cloudy setting. I don't know why. It just kind of gives me a little more to work with. And I don't really like the image on the sort of crisp blue side of things or just the straight daylight. Vibrance, I've taken the vibrance down just a little bit. You can kind of see what it would look like if I put it back the other way. It's pretty subtle. It's just to, just bring it down a touch. But then I've boosted the saturation to compensate for that. Colors. So in this particular instance, like normally I'd probably actually mute the reds a little bit or just desaturate the reds a little just because I find red is not always the best color in the digital world. But in this case, because of the Santa suit, I dropped the luminance a little bit so that it would pop a little bit. And then I've increased the saturation a little bit. And I've shifted the hue slightly too to make the Santa suit a little more pronounced. Orange, I've increased the saturation a tiny bit, mostly for the skin tones here. So you can see kind of what happens in his face. I like that just a little, and luminance as well, same thing. I just wanted the orange to show through a little more. In terms of grading, I've taken the midtones in a slightly orange direction, shadows in a little bit bluer direction, and you can see kind of what that does here. Just cools things off just a touch, but then it gives me room to keep the midtones a little warmer. Highlights, I've increased the tone to a slightly orangier color as well, just also to warm it up just a touch because we've got so much blue going on in the background. Blending, I didn't do a whole lot here. I like to pump up the clarity a little bit and then knock down the dehaze. In this case, I haven't gone too extreme with this, but you can kind of see what happens here. Just sharpens the background a little and keeps the subject crisp. And the dehaze, I think sometimes it can get a little muddy in here, a little too kind of saturated and crisp, so I'll back it off that way a little bit. I haven't done anything with the noise reduction, but now that I'm back here looking at the belt and sort of the black parts of the frame and the pants getting a little bit of noise, like we could do a little luminance, manual noise reduction here up into like maybe around 20, and that might help a little bit. Yeah, you can see already this has changed a bit, so maybe we'll run with that. But otherwise, it doesn't really bother me too much. I would maybe worry about that if I was blowing it up to like a really large size. If you look through the whole shoot, like we're typically sort of between 24 and 50 millimeters overall in focal length. Nice thing about having a zoom is that you don't have to commit. I think for action photography, it's nice to have the flexibility. In terms of aperture, I did shoot some of them at f4 just because I wanted to make sure everything was in focus. 2.8 is still a little bit tight for action. Wakesurfing is not too hard because everything's pretty consistent. Like the distance between the subject and the boat doesn't change that much, and autofocus generally is pretty good for this. But I like to give myself some options, and in some cases, maybe we want to have like a little bit more depth in our photo. This is cool. I think he's got the signature moves, and yeah, just ripping the wave as Santa. Super cool. There you go. I think this might be a candidate for a #2 best shot of the day. It's just, yeah, he's got the kind of, I don't know what you call that. It's like some kind of slide across the top of the wake, but to do that in a Santa suit, that's super hard. I can't even do that not in a Santa suit. And again, surfing with the bag, the Santa sack, that's got to be difficult. It's hard enough to surf just on your own without any apparatus and funny clothing. When we do these photo shoots, it's, you know, kind of complicated. We've got people surfing, there's boating with drones, and of course we do everything safely and legally. But yeah, it's a little bit like, tell me, what's it like, you know, being on the board and helping coordinate some of these things from a photography standpoint?
Well, I mean, as you remember, we had our plan. I was going to do a nice deck start and had to get back to the boat dry to keep the suit looking nice, and then we could launch the drone and go out again. And maybe I didn't have to go for a cold plunge, but yeah, you know, as soon as I went off the back deck there, I couldn't see anything, and immediately just went right into the water. So got that over with quick, and yeah, lost my breath a little bit, but I think it got me a little bit more into it. You know, just kind of get it over with. Now I'm in the water, and hopefully you could see how soaking wet I actually was.
I'm actually amazed that the suit somehow doesn't really look that wet. Maybe it's just the fabric, that sort of faux velvet kind of velour made it shinier. Yeah. but something about it, I don't know. I'm not a big cold plunger, but my experience with it is that there's like a little bit of an adrenaline kick. So maybe there was like you know.
Yeah, I was definitely clear-minded, right?
You know, how important is photography to your business, you know, in general, just from the client kind of standpoint?
I think it's everything. I mean, the experience, I mean, people know what a boat is, but I think that the work that you do and that we've done, it helps people really understand and encapsulate like the luxury of the boats, the experience. I mean, obviously you can't give someone the same feeling of being out in the middle of the lake on a boat and, you know, how serene and beautiful it is in just a photo. Videos are great for that and just capturing the landscape. So I mean, it's everything, right? It's some of the boats that they look sexy, you know, online and in social media. It's important that you show people, you know, what this experience is going to be like. It's not like necessarily other businesses.
It is interesting because I think things have changed that way. Maybe like even 10 years ago, you probably could have done this very differently, but it's like you could have used the same photos for a lot longer. But now with the kind of rapid pace of media, it's like you kind of always have to have something fresh, it seems. And like, you know, even though sometimes we're creating the same kind of photo, arguably, you know, we're doing the same activities, but you know, the day's different, the boat's different, every year's a little different, but it is something about having like fresh content that keeps people interested. I don't know what it is exactly, but I think we are experiencing more through our screens.
Yeah, well, I mean, people are expecting a new photo every day. So, I mean, it's nice for us too to, you know, get better photos and try new ideas. And I mean, who doesn't like laying their eyes on a fresh photo they've never seen before, right? So, you know, it's probably partially for us too, because we get those surf days out on the lake and maybe get some more footage.
Cool, man. Merry Christmas. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, we got a whole range of different photos and videos that we'll be able to use for years for this. So it's kind of a special shoot. We also managed to put the drone up, which allowed us to get some really cool aerial shots of Santa surfing. We did this right at the end because I feel like there's a lot of futzing around with drone filming from a boat. Obviously, it's difficult to launch a drone from a moving craft, even though we launch it when the boat is stationary. You know, the boat's just drifting and back and forth. Taking off itself is not so difficult. You have to make sure everyone's safe. In this particular area, we needed clearance from Transport Canada and the local airport, which we did, of course. But something about launching from a boat, yeah, always makes me a little nervous. Once it comes to the drone in the air, it's not so bad. You just need to keep it under the restricted height and high enough above the water to avoid hitting your surfer, the boat, or other boats. You also need to keep this within visual line of sight according to the law. For safety's sake, we do these shoots with a driver, a spotter, and a photographer. The height that you need to film a boat with a wake surfer behind it is actually quite low, about 30 meters or less depending on the shot you need. But as I mentioned, you need to be mindful of any other traffic that might also be on the water, not just in the air. Where I live, this all requires an RPAS Advanced Operator Certification to conduct this kind of filming and photography. So we saved the drone filming for the end because as cool as it looks, the close-up shots were more important to what we were trying to achieve, and I didn't know how much time we had with Jordan in the lake before he turned into a popsicle. Thankfully, we were able to get a few minutes of drone time, which really did add a level of epicness to the video portion of the project. The hardest part about flying a drone from a boat by far is the landing. When you go to land, it's tricky. There's wind, the boat is listing back and forth, and there's not a lot of surface area to land on, so combine all those things and it becomes very challenging. Not to mention, if there are people on the boat, you need to be extra careful for their safety and take the necessary precautions to avoid any potential injuries. This means shielding them from the drone in some way in advance to make sure they are safe in the event something does go wrong. I can't stress this part enough. When you go to catch the drone, you need to be patient. You need to come up with your hand directly under the drone body, being careful not to come in contact with the propellers, decisively grab it, and then turn it sideways quickly so that the drone shuts off and the propellers stop turning. This is a built-in feature on DJI drones for safety. You also want to make sure to wear eye protection. This isn't really meant to be an instructional on that. That's a whole different thing, but you have to be very careful not to cut yourself up, not to cause damage, and also not to drop the drone in the lake, which is an obvious problem. I've heard numerous stories around here of people trying to use their drone from a boat in a restricted airspace without permission, and what happens is the DJI app will actually let you take off sometimes before it's connected to GPS and things like that. But as soon as it realizes that it is in a restricted area, it is going to try and land and return to home. And you don't have much time for this. You get about 1.5 minutes before this thing starts to land. And if you're in a boat, chances are you're not in the same spot that you took off. Even if it was only a minute ago, this thing is probably going to land in the water. So now it becomes a very difficult exercise in trying to catch a drone in an automatic landing. I think it's totally unsafe. You have to be really careful. But that is, I've heard stories of this. People manage to get the drone in the air because they haven't gone through the proper clearances in the app to say that you're certified to fly in this area. And that's not the only thing you need. You really should be a certified advanced pilot from your local airspace authority to conduct that kind of operation if you are in a restricted space. The other thing that I should note is that when we were filming this, it was at a time that there was no boat traffic. So we weren't really looking at issues with other water traffic and other boat users. So there was no safety issue in that sense, but we did have to be careful to stay in the restricted height limits, which you can set within the app, but you also have to be careful just to not rely entirely on automatic safety features from DJI. You do need to keep an eye on these things yourself and fly responsibly. I can't tell you how funny this was. I could not stop laughing. I was just cracking up the whole time. There's something about seeing Santa surfing behind a boat that is completely ridiculous. And even though it wasn't winter, we wouldn't have had the boats in the water at that time. It was just still so funny. And as far as a return to this little series of Behind the Photo, I couldn't think of a better Christmas edition. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're interested in more things, photography, travel, and maybe food related, subscribe, send me a comment, and we will have more for you soon. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.